got in trouble.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm going to do today is actually disconnect the projector from this setup. And what I'm going to do is connect it to my computer, because the first thing we have to make sure we do is assign the critical evaluation essay, because that's something y'all can start working on. And I'm going to let you know that I'm not going to do, like, in 1302, I do this whole day where, like, I talk about how you would plan one and all that stuff, which I'm not going to do here. What I'm going to do instead is to the end of the video for class today. So, like, after the end, like the end of our normal class time that we talk, I'm going to affix the video of where I talk about this in more detail to 1302. Because it's the same type of essay that they do. So it's like me reading like a little one-page short story, dissecting that story by its elements and writing down all of its elements, then choosing the piece that I want to talk about, and then going over like breaking that piece down and how you could make an essay out of it. So I'm going to affix that to the end of today's video, because we actually just talked about that today, so that'll work out well in the other classes. But that'll give you help on like how to do it. All we're going to cover today really is just going to be, here's the assignment, here's the sample essay and what it does well, and then I'll try to continue the rest of the time on Lord Byron.
For the critical evaluation, can we do it over the ones you did a synthesis analysis of?
You may not. You can do it over ones that you're going to do for the research paper, but you can't do it over one you've already done for the synthesis analysis papers. So it's got to be something different there. Let us see. That's really funny. That's actually going to work later. I have like all the pieces of the remote laid out, so I'm going to go ask for batteries. I hope it reminds me too to. So every 5 minutes I'm going to ask. What's going on? Oh, I plugged it in over here. I really should have plugged it in somewhere else. Let's see if the cord will reach by where I have it currently hooked up. Let's see. So this is the power cord. Well, this thing is hot. It's like really putting out some heat there. I'm just going to hook my computer up because my computer's better than this stupid thing. Excuse me, computer. I'm trying to use this area. Let's see. If I pull on this, is it going to destroy two things? There, gives me more space. All right, let's see how much more distance did that give me. Oh, good, the cord somehow got wrapped around the thing.
Good job.
There we go. Put it down on the ground. We pull it over here. And there we go. Now let's see if we can hook the projector up. Didn't I figure out it doesn't work if I do this? Oh, right, we don't even have it like... Oh, no, we'll check. Let's see. No, I think I remember, only my cord works? Didn't we test that the last time? We spent like a lot of time on it. It was a waste of it. So I'm just going to get my cord out. What? Yeah, I think it's just because the weather changed so suddenly and air conditioning settings weren't prepared for it. Because we're just like everybody else now, where basically what we have is we've got the AC, I think, is controlled at a remote location. Might not even necessarily be Paris. I think somebody told me it was like Garland or Mesquite controls our weather.
What's in Garland or Mesquite? There's not
Like air conditioning control companies that they basically do that because when you put individuals like teachers in charge of the AC, like somebody will have a freezing cold room or a super hot room, and it's inconsistent and it costs extra money because they're not using it properly, and you know.
So they don't let anybody AC or
Right, and so it actually ends up, in a lot of cases, I think, causing. Oh, I hooked to something. You can hear it. I'm too old to be getting up this many times. My knees are killing. Computer.
One of those electrical chairs.
There we go. So now every 5 minutes, I'm going to try to remember to ask Sulphur Springs if they're here. Sulphur Springs? Okay, so y'all see that, which that means that this projector is actually optimized for widescreen computers. Sulphur Springs? Repeat. Okay, there we go. So critical evaluation, you may or may not remember if you took me before what critical evaluation is. Unfortunately, I have to sit because I got a page down, so you're going to see mostly just this. Okay, apologize for that. I was just about to think to myself, I was like, why don't I just stand over there and do this, though, if I'm just going to be behind a computer? Because I can stand up at the cord. It's the cord, you know. I don't have a 30-foot monitor cord. I imagine those are fairly expensive. Like, who needs that?
I didn't know they still sold RGB cables.
They may not. I bought this a long time ago. Silver Springs, you can't see anything on the screen?
I can't see. I'm just looking at a wall. This is.
Okay. Here's what we're going to do. Latydric,
Yes, sir.
you have in front of you on the table somewhere, there are 2 handouts. One of those is yours.
Right.
I'm just talking about that handout for the beginning. Then I'm going to take it back to me, and we'll start talking about Lord Byron, okay? I figure this is a lot easier than in the past. I've tried to hook up to the computer and have you see it on the computer screen, but because of the low fidelity of the image, I have to blow the entire assignment up to like size 24 font, and it becomes like this 30-minute process of me figuring out how big to make it and how can you see it, and it's blurry, and I just figured it's easier to send you a paper and we can all read it along, and then after that we'll go back to talking like normal. I've already got the camera in place to look at me once we move to Lord Byron. Okay, so talking about critical evaluation, I'll just make sure and talk louder now too, so I can you hear me well enough, Latydric?
Yeah, I can hear you. Well.
Okay, cool. So critical evaluation. It's assigned today, and it's going to be due week 7, day 2. So that's basically 2 weeks from today. And it's just like before where you pick one of our assigned literary readings. You can't read anything I haven't assigned or that I put off limits in blue color. I think I did have one person write on something in blue, so close attention to, on Blackboard, go down to the syllabus calendar, and if the reading is in blue, you can't do it. If it's in green, you can, okay? So just pay close attention to that. Whoa, that was really fast. Okay, let's see. So I'm scrolling now down to assignment. So here's what you do. You write a critical evaluation essay for a specific aspect of that particular literary reading. The critical evaluation should unfold or unpack the meaning and workings of a literary text by looking at a very small selection, something like a sentence or a phrase or a word from the work, and analyze that piece in context of the author's purpose and or the text as a whole. So your essay should have a strong thesis, and the rest of the paper should clearly support that thesis. Your thesis, though, is essentially this piece that I have chosen is incredibly important to the themes or whatever literary elements of the entire work that you've chosen. I mean, it's not like you're having to do like a complicated thesis, just this piece is important and here's why. Try to provide compelling thoughts about the themes and subject matter, as well as show true insight through closely reading this one small piece of the work. However, do not analyze the author's ideas from a personal standpoint. In other words, don't offer your opinion on whether the author is ultimately right or wrong about the values or ideas he or she is trying to convey. So this time you got to be objective and analytical. Kind of need to think of this as a dissection in which you're trying to discover the many purposes and achievements of one small organ within a full organism, and fully inspect the piece you choose. When I say like a dissection, yes?
I just wanted to say, you remember how last time the screen shut off because of that temperature warning?
Yeah.
It's up there.
And you got mad at us. We didn't tell you. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you weren't exactly happy because we didn't tell you that it was up there, so I'm telling you that it's up there. Just so you know.
Funsies. Okay. Who feels like they know what critical evaluation is and wouldn't mind going and telling John Chastain that the bulb says it's getting, what, too hot? Temperature? Well, no, you haven't heard this before, so you can't go. Angela's already gone. Too
You
late.
know how many times I've taken
In English class, yes, but this specific assignment, no.
Yeah.
I have a lot of students who've literally written this essay before. What?
Oh, there goes.
Okay, whatever. So let's get back to it. Okay. So basically, it's like you're dissecting. Like, think of this literary work as an organism. You're dissecting it, and you found this one little piece that you've chosen. It's like, say, like the thyroid gland or something. And you're like, okay, well, how does the thyroid gland contribute to the full? How does it keep the whole body going and establish like the whole body's purpose with this one little piece of something that seems like it wouldn't do anything? And without a thyroid gland, a lot of people we die. So it's important. So it's like you have to know exactly what its functions are and how it works and how it contributes to every function of the body. So it's kind of like that with this piece. You're going to pick a selection from the literary work and think, well, this literary work literally would not be able to function in the way that it does if this piece that I've chosen were not there in exactly its form and establishing the meaning that it established. I want you to stay away from like stuff that's like obvious, like if you took it out, it just could not literally exist anymore. Like, say, I don't want you to pick something like Wordsworth's Tintern Abbey, and then you pick like the phrase, "Oh, Sylvan Wye," where he's talking about the river, and you say, if the river wasn't there, he would have nothing to talk about. I don't want you to, I'm not talking about taking away a plot element and suddenly the plot doesn't work anymore. I'm talking about taking away something that would severely affect the meaning, or even if the words were changed to other words that mean basically the same thing, the meaning could not be established in the way that it so perfectly is in its current form. So it's difficult. Like, it's going to be a difficult type of analysis. And it's even, most of y'all who did it for me before did it in fiction usually. And this time you're having to do it in poetry. So in poetry, it's a little bit tougher because finding the most important, or what you consider to be important enough to talk about, words in a piece of literature. There was a temperature warning on the bulb and then it went away, John. Angela was like, Angela, quick, go down and get John Chassis and tell him there's a temperature warning. Now, the last time that thing popped up in class, they went, temperature warning. And I didn't know. And then the thing shut off in the middle of me talking.
Right.
This time, though, it came up and then just went away.
And the warning light is not on, so I'm assuming it's not going to shut off.
I don't know. Should I just text you if it does?
Well, yeah. If it does, it's going to be off probably for the rest of the class.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to reboot it.
I'll just have him warn me every time, and I'll just send you a warning. So really, we can't do anything, is what you're telling me.
At this moment, we can't, but between classes, we can.
Like a bulb could be changed, or a filter could be checked, or
yes.
Okay.
So
all right.
So we'll think you good thought that it will last.
Oh, and I should just mention now while we're talking about the same thing. In my room, the projector, every time I turn it on, and have for like the last 3 or 4 days, I just keep forgetting to tell you because at the end of class I don't remember anymore. But there's this warning comes up and says you've extended the life of or you've gone past the life of the bulb or something like that. Okay. If this may not last or like something may happen or.
All right, I'll get Roy on that one.
Okay.
The message went off, but he's got that heat message that came up and then it went off. But the warning light is not on right now on all the projector that usually flashes. So I think it's going to last until we finish this class. We'll check it out.
It may. We'll see. I mean, if nothing else, I think Latidra can just listen to me talk. He'll be able to see me because once I go back over here, Latidra can see me no matter what, and I can always talk about this assignment. The only issue would be if you guys couldn't see what was up on the screen and you had to pull it up on your phone or something.
And because we can see you.
Yeah, you can see me, you just can't see this assignment, unlike Latidric. Latidric, who I printed this out for him because I honestly like him better. So no offense to you guys here, it's just Latidric is much cooler than all of you. So that's just how it's got to be. He just is. I mean, if you've seen the guy over there, he's awesome. Yeah. So let's get back to it, guys. Here we go. Latidric, are you playing PUBG?
No, I'm just clicking the pin.
Oh, okay. I was thinking because it like.
The mic was on.
Yeah, it was like I played this game called. Did I talk to you about this the other day? PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. In the game, it like has authentic gun noises, and so to me, it sounded like a couple of the gunshot noises in the game. It really sounded like you were like pow 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 pow, rat tat 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 tat, and I was like, oh my gosh, he's playing a game. I was like, how is he managing that in Silver Springs with the internet? Okay, so here we go. Back to it after the pen crisis of 18. So here. So you're going to pick that piece out. You're going to like really extrapolate all the information you can from it. You know, what elements are in there that are really relevant? Like, is there a lot of symbolism going on? I mean, you're probably not going to see something like foreshadowing, but maybe you see like it's incredibly important to the setting or the establishment of the motion, the philosophy that he's going for, a specific theme that you think is running through it. However many elements you think you can tie to it, and get as creative as possible with your. I mean, you may not think that any of what you're saying is true, but if you can make it sound like it's true, I would be really impressed. So now the format's just like before. It's 600 to 800 words, but papers of this assignment tend to run better near the 800 mark in terms of quality. So just FYI. No need to summarize the plot, but you can give like a brief plot summary. I'm talking brief, like 3 to 4 lines in the introduction to set up your sentence, like where it comes. Or your phrase or whatever. No need for a works cited page unless you're using some source that's not the Norton Anthology of English Literature. If that's the case, I want to know where you're reading it, because there have been, like, for example, yesterday I think Carly told me she didn't have her book with her when she read which is unfair because she's not here right now, but she didn't have her book with her when she read Don Juan. So she read Don Juan online. I don't know if y'all noticed, but it seems like almost like maybe a third to like a half of the stanzas have been completely cut out of our edition and just cut down to the essentials.
It took me 2 hours to read.
Because you read it online? Yeah, so see, you read it online. It took you way longer because you're reading all the stanzas we don't even have. And see, that I would need to know that if you're talking about a stanza, I'm like, where is this? That you're talking about a stanza literally that I don't have in my edition. So that's something to consider with something like Don Juan, is that our editions have completely different stuff. And I don't want you to use any outside sources, like say a Spark Notes or like an eNotes or any place where somebody's told you that they understand this really well and that you should trust them. Because I really want to see how well you're able to analyze and dissect the literature on your own. I want to see how creative you can get. That's what I prefer. Because I feel like when you get away from that, when you start using outside sources that you found, you're like, oh, this is what it means. Then I feel like what I'm reading is you being a puppet of the sources that you found. And I don't like that to happen. I want it to seem like you're writing this, not somebody's got their, hand up the back of your head and is making your mouth move, being a puppet. Somebody shoved their hand into your back, up your spine, and then force their fingers on your top and bottom jaw. Really gruesome when you think about it that way. Now, grading, you'll be graded on your ability to, like normal, clearly express your main point through a concise and capable thesis. Present ample detail to prove your thesis from the reading you've chosen. Here's what's different. Find a wealth of meaning through exploring one small aspect of the reading. Speak about necessary plot elements without ever summarizing. Have a properly formatted works cited page if you need one. It's only if you need one that you do need it. And then satisfy length, of course. My hint for all of you is to try to come up with an original idea. I prefer not to just hear things that I've said in class regurgitated to me. I don't know that I don't have an ego. I'm sure I do about some things. I often think that I'm right about stuff, but I'm really into the idea in English that we all have our own opinions. We all come to this with our own thoughts. And so the exciting thing about English to me is, unlike science and math where there's always one right answer, is that there's not really one right answer here. It's like, however you see the world informs the way you're seeing this literature. And so whatever you think you can prove kind of works. And so I don't just want to see, this is what Nichols said in class, here's his opinion thrown back at him all the time. Because I don't just want to sit here and read my opinions spouted back at me all the time. It's just very boring. And that's not what humanities are about. Humanities are about diversity.
I was say that theories have been disproven before.
Which theories?
Theories in general.
Yes.
So
Even established ones.
Kind of opinions.
Even the word, although I think, if I talked to y'all a couple weeks ago about how things sometimes get communicated badly, how I thought the Me Too movement was a very good way of communicating that phrase. Did I talk to y'all about that? No? Well, it's like, I think that some movements have had their words carefully considered, and so they work. Like Me Too, y'all have heard of that? Like after the whole sexual harassment thing in Hollywood, so people who are victims of sexual abuse and sexual harassment what they did was they just put out the hashtag #MeToo, being like, I was also a victim of abuse. That was a very well constructed hashtag because it didn't leave anybody out really, or say this is just about women. It basically, I mean, did y'all know who Terry Crews is? He's the guy on those commercials.
Old Spice.
Old Spice. He's like, ah! He's like very loud. And he was also in this weird little movie called Blended with Adam Sandler, where like he plays like the goofy guy at like the resort, and he's constantly pops up. It's really funny, but he's just this goofy actor. But he says like he was sexually harassed in Hollywood as well. So people even did Me Too who weren't even just part of this female sexual harassment. They were like, well, I'm a male and I was also harassed. So it was like exposing this problem of harassment and abuse. And people who felt they were victims would put that up there. So that was a really well constructed hashtag. I mean, what are the men who were perpetrators? Are they going to get pissed and go, men too, not me too, men too? Well, no, because then you look like a jerk, because it wasn't like the hashtag was women too. It was me too. Or like women are better, or women are abused. Like men are abused too, which I think was the problem with whoever came up with the I mean, I understand the point of it, but like the Black Lives Matter movement, as soon as they said Black Lives Matter, and not if it had just been about Black Lives Matter, and then they had called it All Lives Matter or Lives Matter or something more universal, then you wouldn't have had people coming in and chiming in with Blue Lives Matter and All Lives Matter. And I just think that the wording of the movement itself, though the movement's great, I think the wording of the movement was poorly chosen, especially with something like global warming. Because though global warming is technically what's happening, the temperature is rising degree by degree, they should have gone with something that made more sense, like climate change. Because what happens is now you have everybody who's not a scientist wakes up in the morning, walks out on their porch and goes, it's cold outside, global warming my butt. And so they think global warming is not happening because I feel cold right now in my yard. So the whole world can't be getting warmer because I'm cold right now in my yard, not understanding how weather patterns work and how everything's getting worse as a result of the rising temperatures. So we're going to have crazier storms and worse snows, as well as blistering heat that's getting worse and worse and worse. So they should have always gone with climate change, not global warming, though it was technically correct. And the same vein, I feel like that's the case. Give me a second. What were we talking about right before I started going off into that?
Me too.
Things regurgitated in class, having my words thrown back at me. I know, but what was I talking about right before Me Too? And I started talking about Me Too.
You were talking about coming up with your own opinion, like not looking at other stuff. Or
Yeah,
not,
'cause
not
you get
saying
bored
what you
with
said.
You're saying that like the concisiveness of the words, like Me Too is, unless you already remember that word.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was sort of... I think there was a specific set of wording that I wanted to hit when I got to the end of that whole thing to relate it specifically, but I've forgotten what that exact wording was. But my whole point in that was really that, yes, language needs to be concise, and it has a specific construction. And when it's constructed sort of lazily or without considering all the possibilities, that's when you have problems. And I think that these people who are the great literary artists, especially when they're writing something incredibly short, they put a lot of thought into what word goes where, what does this mean, and how does it sound even. They want to make sure all the sounds are in the right place so that it flows. And just the slightest bit being off there could cause a complete change in understanding. So I think it's important to really pay attention, because even just those slight words can be off. It can cause huge problems. Now, there was something else we were talking about. Because it was that. I was talking about that, but it was something else. And you know what? I think it's worth it. I think it's worth it. Hold on. We're going to stop the recording. I'm going to rewind. I'm going to watch it and figure out what it was. And we're recording again because we figured it out, guys. We got it. The word theories, you said. There are these theories, and theories are disproven, so a lot of science's opinion. However, scientists idiotically decided to use the word theory to talk about when all it really is it's a scientifically established fact. The problem is there are so many iterations of it and possibilities that in order for something to be not a theorem, but what do you call it, a postulate? When something is beyond a theory and is actually like truly proven, it's where you can say that in every single possible instance we know this to be the case. And that's the problem with the theory of evolution. The thing is we know that we can see every data point we have, and that indicates that this is true. But we can't go back in time and watch something evolve, so it's only a theory. So when you have like the theory of evolution, we can't go back and watch a dinosaur slowly evolve into a chicken. We just don't have the way of doing that, so it's called a theory, despite the fact that we have all the evidence in front of us that proves that that's the case. So that's what a theorem is shown that like you've had a hypothesis, you've put it through a test, you've proven it, but because we don't have every single possible data point in existence, it becomes a theory. Like Pythagorean theorem. You know, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Have you ever seen an instance where it doesn't work? No. But there are so many infinite possibilities of it that you can't test it in every single circumstance, so it becomes a theory, not a proof or a fact. And that's how that's why theory is a badly designed word, I think, in scientific method. Did I get bit by a mosquito? Dadgum. It's painful. Sorry. So exactitude of language, it also applies. Yeah, exactitude of language. So you can see how important words are and how just getting something slightly off can change the way people think about it. So these authors specifically worded these things in these ways, and that's another way we can metaphorically apply it is, why this way? Why these words at this time? They're very carefully constructed and thought of, to the point even that Wordsworth constructed the whole thing in his head, said it to himself over and over and over again before he ever wrote it down, because he's got to be in this order. It's got to be this way. It's very interesting. So I'm going to read to you the sample essay. It's actually written, I haven't had a really great one that I thought didn't encroach upon. So here's the way I approach sample papers. When I choose a sample paper, I have a number of considerations. I used to write my own sample papers. The problem with that was that I write it like a postgraduate actually has been an English teacher for years level. And so when people are reading them, they go, what the hell is he talking about? This is not, what? Is this like meant to be published or something? I'm not trying to be cocky. It's just when I put a lot of thought into it, it's that I'm writing it as though I would a grad paper, and it's not normal. And so I want people to have a sense of what is normal for like a student to write. And so what I generally do is try to choose a student sample that they've actually written. But I also try to find one that has not a low lexical scale, but pretty decent lexical density, meaning like it's got a vocabulary level that's somewhere around like 8th to 10th grade instead of the one that I generally, when I throw mine through a lexical density checker, it usually says that I'm writing at about a 16th, 17th grade level, which is like post-grad. And I'm like, well, it's going to be really hard for them to read because some of the sentences go on for like 6 lines. And it's not fair because like you're like, English is not my life. I don't have to read this. And so the warning is back. The warning is back. Okay, so just FYI, the warning is back for the projector. If it goes off, it goes, and the red light's there. Can we like turn down the brightness or something where it's just like, oh, this isn't so bad, like this is chill, like it is outside. So I was thinking like, oh, if it goes off, I'll just switch to the other computer. That one is the projector. It's not the. So when I choose these samples, I try to find something that sounds like anybody in the class could have written it. It just sounds like a normal, everyday vocabulary and sentence structure. I also try to choose something that I feel I'm not stealing anything from people who would have normally wanted to have written about that. In some cases, that's not possible. Like with Minister's Black Veil, I know people love writing about that story, and English 1302, and I sort of stole it. But with Rose for Emily, I know people like to write about it, but the sentence that this girl chose is one I don't think anybody would have ever picked out. Because she picks a sentence and then extrapolates from that sentence as much meaning as possible in that story. Just a little summary for you real quick. Rose for Emily is about a lady who is part of an established family in the town in like the early 1900s, late 1800s. In this established family, they're sort of fallen out of favor. The world around them is getting more advanced. They're starting to have like cars, gasoline pumps, and things. So it's got to be at least 20th century. And this old lady just lives in this stately home and kind of secludes herself. And it's like there's this little pocket of old-timiness in this one part of the town. Now, the story is based on her funeral. It's like her funeral has just happened. Then they talk about everything they know about Emily through the course of her life. And it turns out that what she really did was this one time that they were happy for her. They thought she had a lover. And like maybe she was going to get married. But instead, apparently he wanted to leave. And so she poisoned him and kept his dead body in her bed for the rest of her life. And they found the dead body after her funeral was over. That there was like this emaciated corpse in a bed next to where she would lay. So, really gross, yeah. So in that story, the student picked out this sentence, which was, yeah, there's no projector here, so you guys can't see anything, but I can. If you want to follow along, you can pull it up on your phone on Blackboard, and you can see the assignment. I just updated it today, so it's there. But I'll just keep talking. The sentence that was chosen was the second half of one of the sentences in the very beginning of the story. And it's only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores. In fact, I will unconnect my monitor now because it's useless. Especially since y'all are sitting there trying to find this thing. So she kind of gives an introduction that sets up the sorts of things she'll be pointing out that the sentence does. I actually didn't even believe the sentence was in the story at first. I literally went and looked it up on my computer. I did a Control F function to look up the word coquettish in the story to see if it actually existed in the story, and it did. And there it was right there on the page. Only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps and eyesore among eyesores. So I started reading her paper, a little skeptical. I was like, what is she going to tell me this sentence does? Stupid. From the very beginning of this short story, Faulkner alludes to the emphasis on the symbolism of the house and its owner, as well as foreshadows what will happen later on in the story. Faulkner does all of this through a small description depicting a part of the story's setting. This simple sentence introduces why the house Miss Emily occupies is one of the most important symbols throughout the story. Okay, so it's talking about like it's going to somehow relate this sentence to symbolism in the story of the house, relating, I guess, to the Miss Emily, and some kind of foreshadowing of what's going to happen. So those are the elements I see she's going to cover. So I'm like, okay, I'm a little skeptical because I don't really see it, but whatever. I can see the symbolism. I don't see what the foreshadowing means. And so she starts talking and says, in the words preceding the chosen phrase above, the environment around the house is described. It is especially important to notice how the description of the atmosphere around the house is new and progressive, whereas the house itself is a complete contrast to that ideal. Simply put, the house does not fit into the surroundings. It does not belong with the ambiance of the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps. The house sticks out in what most people in the town would agree to be a displeasing way. So she actually points out words that reference what she's talking about. So when she says, like, the area around is progressive, she points out cotton wagons and gasoline pumps. So she's pointing out to me exactly what she means by what she says, using the text as evidence. That's what I'd like everybody to do. So I'm like, okay, so the house doesn't fit in. And she says the house represents Miss Emily herself. She is seen as an outcast in her town, specifically in the time period where most young women were out getting married and starting families, because she's known as being a recluse. To the townspeople, Miss Emily is seen as an eyesore. As most people would conclude, eyesores tend to be popular topics of discussion. And this is ironic given that even though the townspeople would rather personally ignore exceptions to their social ideals, it's in their nature to publicly confer about it, thus giving Miss Emily's seemingly insignificant way of living an even greater significance. It does not help that they already set themselves apart from her because of her family's history of being in a higher social status. So I thought this was an intriguing idea. I would have not been that impressed had she just said, it's like Miss Emily, she's a recluse. But she adds this really compelling idea that when you have somebody in society who is an eyesore, and she ties it back to the word from the sentence, that we tend to talk about those people and make them a general topic of discussion. Oh, that person. Oh, look, they're weird. And what ends up happening is we sort of elevate them in our consciousness and the importance that they have to us. It kind of makes sense, too, that they asked, there's this happiness scale that Harvard does. Have y'all heard of this? I think I've talked about it sometimes before, but not a lot. It was a TED Talk a guy gave, but it is a Harvard longevity study where they started following people way back in the day, like in maybe like 1920s, 30s, I can't remember, maybe even the 40s, 50s. They started this study a long time ago, and they followed, like, I think a few hundred or like 80 or so men from like the normal city streets of Boston, like just the poor area of Boston, and men who were at Harvard at this all the same age. And so they wanted to follow these people through their lives and see what they discovered about what it is that makes people happy, what it is that makes them successful. And they found that the level of success for the Harvard people and the regular people was sort of the same. Like in terms of like, was a huge stressor that caused people to die quicker. They found that being alone was something that caused people to die quicker if you didn't have a family or friends. And one of the things that they found was that, there was one person in the study who ended up becoming president, which is interesting. I can't remember if it was JFK, but I want to say maybe. May have been an Eisenhower. No, that's not possible. May have been, I don't know who it was. But what was I going to say about this Harvard longevity study? I mean, this happens to me a lot. No, I don't think I'll actually find it if I look back, because there wasn't as much of a key to it this time. Seeming more important by talking about them later, happiness, pleasure. It was one of the key things that makes people happy over time, is having people to talk to, having friends, and not being lonely. And feeling like you're part of a group. So I guess one of the reasons that people do this, they talk about one another, is it's sort of like providing yourself validation. And, that's what it was. They found that the younger generations, for whatever reason, when they looked at the younger generations these days, because they started studying their kids, they found that when they asked students, like, what's the most important thing that you want to be when you grow up? And people, like, they asked them, like, a number of, and the people put a very lot rich, like more than half put rich, but even more than put rich, put famous. They want to be famous in this younger generation, like, I guess, the post-millennials. And it is interesting that people want to become famous. There's this idea of fame, and people don't want to end up just becoming like the boring, everyday, like, there's nothing special about you. People want to feel like there's something special about themselves. So I think it's sometimes when people don't feel like there's necessarily something special about themselves, they may end up talking about something special in others that's just different, something different than their social order. I don't know if that's true or not, but she kind of points that out and really got me thinking about it. And I was like, that is kind of true. We tend to spend a lot of time in society talking about those that are outside of our cultural order, like people we find to be weird and do weird things, yet we also elevate them in the importance in our conscious by doing so. So I thought it was a really compelling idea that she pointed out. And she's probably got an A now, because I thought that was a neat idea I've not heard before. And I continue on. The house's stubborn and coquettish description is how the town views Miss Emily. So she's not just talking about it now as a house, she's relating it to Miss Emily. And I figured that was coming. Even though they know she is a nice girl with significant upbringing, her solitary lifestyle is not a common one at the time because she's shown no signs of changing it. They assume she is obstinate in living that way. Her reclusive behavior then becomes an almost accepted part of the society, if only because it provides something to talk about. So it's not just that we publicly confer about it, but honestly, we need people who are different so that we can talk about them, so that they give us something to talk about. There's a level of interest there. And I thought that was even more compelling. Just as the house stands out among its industrial surroundings, the people cannot change it, so instead they find entertainment at its expense. They especially find pleasure in the fact that without her father around to keep her a well-rounded young lady, she has brought her family's name down from its status. Very much like how the house was once a regal portion of the neighborhood and now stands as a blemish to the town. It's kind of interesting, like in commerce, like they used to, I mean, there was people who complained about there was this old log downtown that like had no bark on it and just sat in the middle of this field downtown. It was like right between two buildings, like it had been turned, like the building had been burned down, I guess, a long time ago, or torn down. And so in the middle it was like this little like grass kind of field-ish. It's not a field, it's like not very big. It's a lot. There you go. And so this grass lot had this big log in the middle of it. And everybody's like, oh, and I always just kind of liked it. I thought, it's kind of, it gives it character, you know, having this old broken down log there. And they just removed it one day. I didn't see anybody talk about how it was going to be removed or anything. I have no idea where it went. It was beautiful. Like, and it was, I think a lot of people felt it's missing once it was gone. It's like, oh, where'd that thing go? That sucks. I think it was a cottonwood tree. You know, cottonwood has that pretty white bark. It was old. It was a tall one. So it was like, it was really cool. I'm only guessing. It may not have been. It was just very white bark or tree. An asp?
Aspen tree.
Aspen, maybe?
They have real white bark.
Would they be around here?
Nah, I don't think so. I haven't seen any around.
And so then that's the part about the social stuff, how she stands out as a blemish in the town. Oh, wait. Did I read the rest of that paragraph? They especially find pleasure in the fact that without her father around to keep her a well-rounded young lady, she has brought her family's name down from its status. Very much like how the house was once a regal portion of the neighborhood, now stands as a blemish to the town. So it's like, okay, nice comparison. I like that. Probably have an A at this point. And then I continue on, and she says, although the word decay seems to be an insignificant part of the sentence, upon further inspection it becomes very striking. The story ends with the revealing of the rotting corpse of Miss Emily's ex-fiancé, her sick personal keepsake of her lover. After reading the end of the story and going back to the phrase describing the house, readers can find that there was obviously more to it than just not fitting in. The decay in the sentence not only displays that it was an old house on the outside, but also represents that what will literally be inside the house, a decaying body. In going with the symbolism of the house, it could also represent that Emily herself had decay, which would be her obviously corrupted mind for thinking it was acceptable to poison someone to death, be able to keep them forever. At this point, I was blown away. I was like, you're telling me if I'd paid attention to the second sentence of the story, I'd know there was going to be a dead body at the end? That's holy crap. And because the sentence totally could have read, and this is what I kind of want you guys to approach this as. This sentence could have read, only Miss Emily's house was left, raising its obstinate and dainty disrepair above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps, something not great to look at. I don't know. It could have been completely different words, but it's not. It's these words. So if these are the words that were chosen, why these words? Why are these words important? And so she looked at decay and said, well, you're not going to put a decaying body or decayed body at the end of a story and have no significance for the word decay at the very beginning. It's not like he goes, oh, I did that? What? You're kidding. I mean, he thought about every word thoughtfully when he wrote this story. Huh?
Sounds like a thesis.
A thesis?
Yeah, because you're supposed to, at the end of the story, or at the end of a paper, you're supposed to come back to your original point and then, like, rehash it.
Yeah, true. He has gone through his whole story with a fine-tooth comb and realized, you know, I might want to have something to, like, you know, just a little Easter egg for people, you know, this decay, and foreshadow it here in the beginning. So I want people to have decay on their minds. I want people to be thinking about decay so it's there. So that once the time comes, they're not overly shocked because there's been this sort of, like, mood building around it. Kind of like a thesis just running through the whole course of the story. But yeah, so I was blown away at this point. I was like, I would have been happy with just people confer about different people. And then she gives me, yeah, if you'd paid attention to the first sentence of the story or a couple first few sentences, you would have noticed there was going to be a dead body at the end. I was like, what? Genius. So I was really impressed with this. And she says, or ends in the conclusion, the irony is that Miss Emily was ostracized for being different, but the way people thought she was different turned out to be relatively normal compared to the reality of what she was like. Faulkner designed the phrase, "Only Miss Emily's house was left, an eyesore among eyesores," to perfectly represent how Miss Emily's house and herself are tied together, both literally from her living in it, and symbolically by the way the house is snubbed by the people of the town, as well as the stubborn and decay aspects both the house and Miss Emily possess. Now, honestly, the conclusion is a little busy. She's trying to shove a lot in there, but I honestly think that what she's trying to shove in there is all the stuff that she felt she couldn't get in the introduction because she didn't want to give up the decay foreshadowing in the intro, so I think she's trying to kind of shove everything at the end. Now, I did appreciate that she didn't include the whole sentence in that last in the conclusion, because I already knew it was by that point. It was only 678 words, and I gave it 100. Did I talk to you about my 100 grades? Did I mention that? In class here?
No, not in this.
Not in this one? Consider when you get an essay grade back, 95 is my 100. So if you get a 95, that's 100. I have lots of things like achievements, the in-class discussion points, the very easy presentation later, all these buffer grades that are meant to make up for the fact that I have this ideological problem with giving people 100s on papers. Because for me, 100 is like perfect. Like you've really worked this out, and I couldn't think of a way it could go better. So I thought that she did such a good job of giving these phenomenally creative ideas that I gave her 100. Now 100 is, if you want to think like 95 is like 100 for you. 96 is like a 105. 97 is like a 110. 98 would be like getting 120. 99 would be like getting 135. And 100 would be like getting 170. It's basically as good as 2 other people's papers. If you combine them, it's like they'd win the fight. Or he'd win it. Okay. I'm just imagining 2 papers fighting. It's the weirdest thing. So she should feel incredibly good because it's like something that I rarely give out. I maybe give like anywhere between 200 and 300 a semester on essays. Lots of 99s and 98s and 97s. But if you get anything higher than 95, that's something you'd be like, oh, look at that. I got a better than 100 is how you should sort of think about it. So if anybody got like a 95 on that first essay, that just know that you basically got 100 on it. So that's, in terms of like normal teachers and what they think about 100, that was your 100. She's like, oh, he liked it. He thought it was really good. 100. Okay, cool. So I think a lot of teachers just give out. When I have revision, it makes it hard for me to like, I got to be honest with grades and think like, oh, this is not perfect. It could always have room for improvement. And a lot of teachers just give out 100s like they're candy. And there's definite problems, but they're like, well, that was good enough. I feel good about that. Let's just give them 100. Really boost their confidence. I'm not about boosting confidence. I'm about being honest. And so if I feel like it's perfect, I told her it was perfect. So perfect that I felt that it was even like something I could use as a sample because most of the 100s I get are very academically written. This one was an accessible, normal, everyday essay. I felt that it deserved 100. Yes.
I was gonna say that my college experience, I've been getting a lot better grades than like in high school. Like
Yeah.
In high school, I would make like 40s and 50s on my essays, and I never changed like how I wrote essays. I just got into college, and then I was making like A's.
Yeah, I don't know what the difference is in college, but I noticed the same thing when I was in high school versus not just, I didn't ever go to actually community college. I should have because it was cheaper, but I was dumb and was like, I want to go live in the dorms, Mom and Dad. And they were like, dorms are expensive. I was like, yeah. And so I went, and it was in my hometown. And so I went and lived in the dorms in my hometown just to get out of the house. But I went to A&M Commerce, and I felt I was getting better grades in A&M Commerce than I did in high school. And I got like 7th or 8th in class at Commerce. I mean, I didn't do too shabby. But I still was making more A's than I did it in high school. If you don't account for point bonuses that you get for taking like AP classes and stuff, I was making sometimes even C's. But I made 1 C in college. It was a history class because, man, those history classes. It's just, there's so much to remember. That particular course was one of those courses where it was like, you'd read the book and it was like, the test was like, here's a pot from a hut in like 1760s Central North America. Based on this, describe the daily activities of a typical teenage girl at around this time making sure to cover the degrees of sexism and homophobia that might be present in her daily life.
It's like a math problem, but it's
I was like, and it was just like, I was looking at a pot. It was like, tell me what the lady is like who might have held this pot. And it was a completely subjective question. They give you crap answers. They'd be like, no, this is wrong. You're wrong about this. I was like, what? This is so hard. And it was like all like that. It wasn't like history in high school where it was like, the coach hands you your Scantron and it's like, what date did this happen? This year. It wasn't that at all. It was like, extrapolate what could be going on in this historical setting. Yeah.
An anthropologist.
Yeah, it was almost like it was like.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. You could write an anthropologist describe you holding this pot.
Well, it's the 21st century, and somebody's picked it up now, and is taking this picture of it. So, yeah, I really don't think that anybody should feel bad if you're getting 95s. I think that's perfectly common. It's perfectly fine. It's 100. I just do have that ideological break where I can't tell you it's perfect. So then if you get like a 97, 98, you'd be like, yeah. We'll go brag to people. And then you go, Mom, Dad, I got a 98. And they're like, why not 100? Mom, you don't understand. You don't understand. You give her this whole explanation I just gave you. I'm like, oh, okay, well, that sounds great. That's fantastic. Yeah, Mom, I got 140. So like I said, I told her it was excellent, absolutely what I was looking for, stellar work. And I told you that I'm most impressed if you pick something small I wouldn't have noticed before, but you make it important to me. And when I say something small, like a small selection, don't go find like a short poem, like say Epitaph, and then tell me the first 6 lines of the 8-line epitaph are really important. Well, duh. If you were to do that, I would want you to like maybe pick a word from a small poem. If it's something a little longer, a couple of pages, maybe pick like a phrase like 5 to 7 words from the poem. And if it's like something like Don Juan, you could go with like something that adds up to like a sentence, maybe as long as a stanza, but that would increase what you'd have to write. So I would maybe go with 4 lines or so from one of those stanzas. Just adjust the length of what you choose based on the length of the literary work you've got. I want to be impressed, not be like, oh, look, they show me that like this 4-stanza poem, the first 2 stanzas are really important. Now, this is obvious. And think of it like a dissection. I told you, a dissection, not a dissection. It's like you're dissecting this little piece you've chosen and showing how it promotes the function of the whole thing, creates meaning, establishes themes, deals with like the literary terminology. And you don't have to use the exact literary terminology here. You don't have to be like, how do I find a poem about setting and symbolism and foreshadowing? You don't have to do that at all. In fact, I would prefer that you not try to copy this one. And I have a lot of students, too, who'll end up writing the paper and write their paragraph is, from the very, very beginning of this poem, Wordsworth alludes to the emphasis on the symbolism of the river, as well as foreshadows what will happen later on with his sister.
So,
Wordsworth. So don't just repeat all the language that's here.
So, like, because Wordsworth, he talks about the river, like, could you take, even though, it was a physical location that he actually went to,
Yeah.
could you take the river and make it mean something different, or maybe think, like, maybe he had another meaning for it?
Yes. However, I would caution, when you do that, it's what you can prove in the text or what you can prove. It's in the text because I don't want you using outside sources. So I think in your case it'd be okay because we talked about how you wanted to apply like the theories of Carl Jung to something, and I would actually find that really interesting. But you would have to cite that outside source about Carl Jung and don't just say, well, these are things I know. I would need to see an actual source by Jung and like information that comes from him in that assessment. So if you've got a permission like that from me where I've told you, yeah, you can do that, you can use an outside source, you can, but it has to be something like that where it's something you've actually talked to me about and before the night it's due. Not like 2 hours before it's due, you're like, hey, I got this idea. I'm going to do 4 stanzas and I want to reference like out. No. It's got to be something we talked about beforehand. So yeah, if you want to use Jung with like basically anything, I'd be cool with it. So yeah, you can take that river and make it mean whatever you think you can make it mean. Otherwise, though, just stick with the text and what the text can tell you something means. So I don't want you to use the exact language of the paper. Like, I want you to write this thing from scratch yourself. Don't be like, that's a good line, I'll use it, but just switch out my own words. If that happens and I get plagiarism dings on the safe assign checker for this paper, it's going to be no higher than a 50. And I'll probably tell you redo it and fix the parts, and I'll just give you a 0 as a placeholder until you do. It's probably what I'll really do. But if I feel it's like only one line, I'll give it a 50 and then just say, hey, fix it. Any questions about this before we spend 10 minutes talking about Don Juan? No? Now, any questions in Sulphur Springs? No? Okay. Now what I'm going to do is come over here. I'm going to close this assignment. I'm going to open up my syllabus. I'm on some quiz page. Hold on just a second. I go 23, 23.
He could leave and you'd never know because he can't see.
Oh, I will. I will. It'll happen. If that happens, I will know. Let's see. Did something happen? No. I thought I saw like a flash. Okay, let's see. I need to not forget this because it's mine. Scoot the surge protector back. Move the cord. Bring this over. Set it down. Toss my monitor cable onto the bag so I don't. Oh, shoot. I'll end up leaving it there if I don't set it back on my backpack. There we go. Adjust the camera to make sure it's pointing at me. And now, okay, finally, Latydric, you can see me, correct? Now I'm back on screen. Latydric, can you see me on screen? I think it's muted, Latydric. Push the button, and then tell me if you can see me on screen. Latydric. Huh?
I was just thinking maybe it cut the.
It's not supposed to. No, it's supposed to still work. Or he can see me. He said I could. Remember, he said I could only see the wall. I might try plugging this back in. We'll see if that does anything, but I don't think it is. I'll ask him, like, I guess maybe through email what happened, or maybe I'll see if he emailed me. I'm curious. I see if he emailed and say, you went away. Na, come on. This song. Let's talk about Lord Byron. Okay. Go over here to the book. So 17, for instance, this, right? Page 17.
1747?
We were at 1747 we stopped. Is that what you said?
Stanza 60 something like that, or somewhere in there.
Ba, 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 ba. Stanza 92?
Yeah, I think that's what you said.
That's a lot of stanzas. Oh yeah, here we go. Stanza 92. You're absolutely correct. So we got 8 minutes to cover this. Let's do it. So let's see. I love this part right here at 92. So they're starting to develop feelings for each other and stuff. And he says in 92, he thought about himself. This reminds me so much of teenage years. He thought about himself and the whole earth, of man the wonderful, and of the stars, and how the deuce they could ever have birth. And then he thought of earthquakes and of wars, how many miles the moon might have in girth, of air balloons, and of the many bars to perfect knowledge of the boundless skies. And then he thought of Donna Julia's eyes. He's just like, he's getting swooning over her. So he's like, all these really important things in the universe he's musing about, and then he's like, and her eyes are pretty, And he says, in thoughts like these, true wisdom may discern longings sublime and aspirations high, which some are born with, but the most part learn to plague themselves withal, they know not why. 'Twas strange that one so young should thus concern his brain about the action of the skies. So saying he's mature beyond his years here. Do you think 'twas philosophy that this did? I can't help thinking puberty assisted. So yeah, he doesn't really care about it. He's only looking at the stars and going, how does this all work? Because he's so swooning for her. His mind's only even going that direction as a result of that. So let me see, is this the part? Which was on a summer's day, the 6th of June. I like to be particular in dates. In 105 it says, but there were she and Juan face to face. When two such faces are so, 'twould be wise, but very difficult to shut their eyes. Okay, so the pretty faces seeing each other. Let me see. Let's go down to stanza 115. This is fantastic. And Julia sate with Juan, half embraced and half retiring from the glowing arm, which trembled like the bosom where 'twas placed. Yet still she must have thought there was no harm, or else 'twere easy to withdraw her waist. But then the situation had its charm, and then, God knows what next. I can't go on. I'm almost sorry that I e'er begun. And then down in 117. And Julia's voice was lost except in sighs, until too late for useful conversation. The tears were gushing from her gentle eyes. I wish indeed they had not had occasion. This is a genius line too. But who, alas, can love and then be wise? Isn't that compelling thought? Who can love and then be wise? No. You're wise, then you fall in love, and then that goes out the window. No. You love, and then you all thought is lost. You're just wrapped in the love. Oh, gosh. Not that remorse did not oppose temptation. A little she strove. Oh, this is great. This is the best part. A little she strove, and much repented. Good Lord, I'm sorry. Good Lord. And whispering, I will never consent. Consented. So she's, I'll never fall to temptation. Nom, 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 you know. And it happened. So then they have this. I want to get to 133. It's really important to me. Oh, no. 127, then I'll read. No, let's do 133. So 133. And he always sounds like he's saying something compelling and then just totally screws it up, like the narrator. Man's a phenomenon, one knows what, not what, and wonderful beyond all wondrous measure. 'Tis pity, though, in this sublime world, that pleasure's a sin, and sometimes sin's a pleasure. Few mortals know what end they would be at, but whether glory, power, or love, or treasure, the path is through perplexing ways, and when the goal is attained, we die, you know, and then, what then? I do not know. No more do you. And so good night. Return we to our story. He's just like, it looks like he's moving toward the meaning of life, and then we die, you know, and then what? What then? I do not know. You don't either. So, good night. We're done. You know, it's just like, you know, he can't think of what the answer is, so he just gives up. And he's like, anyways, on with the story. It's such to the narrator. The narrator is so perfect. He's goofy. It's like he's drinking the whole time. You know, actually, that's what it says, isn't it? Having got exceedingly drunk, he probably uses hair of the dog, you know, drink some more. You know what that phrase means? Hair of the dog that bit you? It's like when you got a bad hangover, so what you do to help alleviate the problems of that hangover is you drink some more. Because then it gives you a slight drunkenness so that you don't feel so pained from the hangover. That's what they did before ibuprofen. You're like, maybe one day I'll drink alcohol. Because you're also young. Let's see. We'll skip this. Yeah, so here we have stanza 139 down at the bottom. It says, I can't tell how or why or what suspicion could enter into Don Alfonso's head, but for a cavalier of his condition, it surely was exceedingly ill-bred, without a word of previous admonition, to hold a levee around his lady's bed and summon lackeys armed with fire and sword to prove himself the thing he most abhorred. Like, he didn't want to be a cuckold. This is somebody whose wife has cheated on them. Yet gets the whole posse around the bed and is like, you cheated on me. And then she's like, I love how it says in stanza 142, she says, in heaven's name, Don Alfonso, what do you mean? And almost even phrases it that way. It's like, what do you mean? Like you know she's guilty. And I love how he's looking all over the place and can't find. And it says, how would they think to look everywhere but inside the bed? Because that's where he is. They just like shoved him in the blankets. And then I love how in 146, she's like, yes, Don Alfonso, husband now no more. If ever you indeed deserve the name, is it worthy of your years? You have 60, 50, or 60. It's all the same. Is it wise or fitting causes to explore for facts against a virtuous woman's fame? Ungrateful, perjured, barbarous Don Alfonso, how dare you think your lady would go on so? But she did. Like, she did exactly the thing he suspects her of. And she's, like, chewing him out. She's like, you're old. And, like, I love it. It's just, you know exactly what's happening. And then we have to stop. No, I think this happened last semester, too. But we just don't have the time. So, basically what happens, of course, is Don Alfonso leaves, come back, somehow notices the shoes, and so gets him. Then John Juan kicks his butt, naked, and runs out. Julie ends up going to a nunnery and writing him a letter. The whole thing's great. And then at the end, like, Byron's making fun of Wordsworth and Coleridge. And the very last thing he does, he talks about what this is going to be. The poem's epic and is meant to be divided in 12 books, each book containing, all this stuff. At the very end, he says, his last stanza in 213, he says, but now at 30 years my hair is gray. I wonder what it will be like at 40. I thought of a peruke the other day. My heart is... Oh, wait, no, I'm actually not... That's not that. Yeah, here it is. It says, go, little book, from this my solitude. I cast thee on the waters. Go thy ways. And if, as I believe, thy vein be good, the world will find thee after many days. When Southey's read and Wordsworth understood, I can't help putting in my claim to praise. The first 4 rhymes are Southey's every line. For God's sake, reader, take them not for mine. So as his closing, he uses somebody else's closing from another book that he thinks is stupid. And uses that as his closing while saying, please don't confuse these words for mine, I hate them. But that's how he closes it out. It's just the weirdest, he's such like a weird hypocrite, like goofy, I don't know, y'all get out of it. So fun. Now, if you read the whole thing, you'll end up getting all the quiz questions correct. So even if the stuff we didn't get a chance to talk about. Y'all have a good one.